Emotional withdrawal as silent punishment is one of the most subtle yet deeply wounding behaviors an avoidant can display in a relationship. It is rarely loud, rarely dramatic, and almost never acknowledged directly. Yet it holds immense psychological power. The avoidant, when triggered by intimacy or emotional expectations, does not argue or confront. Instead, they retreat into themselves. This withdrawal is not merely a pause for self-reflection, but becomes a weapon of silence, a way to regain control when they feel emotionally cornered. The partner, in contrast, is left confused, anxious, and desperate for reconnection, not realizing that the distance is being used as a tool of dominance disguised as self-protection. At the root of this behavior lies the avoidant's profound discomfort with emotional dependency. Their childhood or formative experiences may have taught them that love is unsafe, that vulnerability invites rejection or control. So, when closeness grows, they unconsciously activate the same defense mechanism that once protected them, emotional detachment. However, what once served as a shield in childhood becomes a form of disrespect in adulthood. By withdrawing, they deny the relationship mutual emotional participation. Their silence, absence, or indifference communicates something far louder than words ever could. It says, "My comfort matters more than your connection." For the partner, this creates a psychological imbalance. The moment they express a need, share a feeling, or ask for reassurance, the avoidant may respond with distance. They might stop texting, become cold in conversation, or avoid physical touch. On the surface, it appears like they simply need space, but the underlying message is far more complex. The withdrawal functions as a silent punishment for emotional expression. It tells the partner that their vulnerability leads to rejection. Over time, the partner learns to suppress their needs, walking on emotional eggshells, afraid that one wrong word might push the avoidant away again. This silent conditioning damages the very foundation of trust and intimacy. The tragedy of this behavior is that it often hides behind the mask of emotional control or maturity. The avoidant may even pride themselves on not being dramatic or staying calm, while in truth they are disengaging from the emotional labor that every healthy relationship requires. Their silence becomes a quiet assertion of power, a way to dictate the pace of connection without having to say a word. The partner feels small, unseen, and often blames themselves for the emotional coldness that has entered the space between them. The dynamic becomes a cycle of pursuit and withdrawal, where one longs for closeness while the other hides behind emotional distance. Emotional withdrawal also strips the relationship of repair. Every bond faces conflict, but when one partner disappears instead of engaging, the other is left alone with unresolved emotions. This lack of resolution fosters resentment and emotional starvation. Over time, love becomes fragile, defined by unspoken hurts and incomplete conversations. What makes this form of disrespect so insidious is that it doesn't break the relationship in an instant. It slowly erodes it. It teaches both partners that silence is safer than honesty, that avoidance is more effective than understanding. In the end, emotional withdrawal as silent punishment is not an act of peacekeeping. It is an act of quiet dismissal. It disrespects not only the partner's emotions but the sacred space of the relationship itself. It transforms love into a battlefield of silence, where one person speaks through absence and the other bleeds through longing. The most painful part is that the avoidant often believes they are simply protecting themselves, unaware that in doing so, they are unconsciously inflicting the very emotional abandonment they once feared most. Dismissing feelings under the guise of rationality is one of the most deceptive ways an avoidant shows disrespect in a relationship. It appears calm, reasonable, even intelligent on the surface, but beneath that polished exterior lies a deep invalidation of emotional reality. The avoidant often positions themselves as the logical one, the voice of reason in moments of emotional intensity. When their partner expresses hurt, fear, or longing, they respond with detached analysis rather than empathy. They may say things like, "You're overreacting," or "You're being too sensitive," or they might even laugh it off, insisting that emotions complicate things unnecessarily. To them, emotional expression feels chaotic and unsafe, so they distance themselves by intellectualizing every feeling that arises. This behavior stems from an early adaptation to emotional neglect or inconsistency. Avoidants often grow up in environments where emotions were dismissed, minimized, or even punished. They learn to survive by disconnecting from their inner emotional world, valuing logic over vulnerability. As adults, this conditioning manifests in their relationships as emotional superiority. They truly believe that staying detached is a form of strength, and they unconsciously impose this belief on their partners. The result is an ongoing emotional imbalance where one person is forced to suppress their feelings while the other maintains control through rationality. When an avoidant dismisses their partner's emotions, they send an unspoken message: "Your inner world doesn't matter." The partner may try to explain their feelings repeatedly, hoping to be understood, but instead, they are met with analysis or subtle ridicule. The avoidant may dissect their emotions as if they were solving a problem rather than comforting a person. They might say, "You shouldn't feel that way," or "That doesn't make sense," believing that they are helping to calm the situation, while in reality, they are erasing the partner's emotional truth. This repeated dismissal creates a slow, invisible erosion of self-esteem. The partner begins to doubt their own feelings, wondering if they are indeed too emotional, too irrational, or too needy. Over time, the relationship becomes emotionally sterile. The avoidant's over-reliance on logic turns intimacy into a debate rather than a connection. When emotions arise, whether from love, conflict, or vulnerability, they treat them as foreign intrusions to be controlled rather than shared. This constant invalidation makes their partner feel unseen, unheard, and emotionally starved. The avoidant may believe they are promoting stability by staying calm, but what they are truly doing is building a wall made of intellectual detachment. They hide behind logic to avoid the discomfort of empathy, mistaking emotional safety for emotional avoidance. This pattern also damages communication on a deeper level. Every relationship needs emotional validation to thrive. When one partner consistently dismisses the other's inner experience, conversations become one-sided. The partner learns to silence their emotions before they even speak, fearing they'll be labeled dramatic or irrational. What begins as a subtle habit of minimizing feelings eventually becomes a system of control. The avoidant dictates which emotions are acceptable and which are not, shaping the emotional tone of the relationship in their favor. This is not an overt form of disrespect, but it's one of the most psychologically manipulative because it invalidates the partner without ever appearing cruel. The irony is that avoidants often believe they are being fair-minded, that their logical approach makes them more grounded. But in truth, it reveals their fear of emotional chaos, their inability to tolerate vulnerability, both their own and others. By hiding behind reason, they deny the emotional truth that love is not meant to be dissected. It is meant to be felt. When feelings are dismissed repeatedly, love loses its warmth and becomes mechanical. The partner no longer feels safe expressing themselves, and what was once a space for emotional growth becomes a quiet prison of control masked as calmness. Selective availability and conditional presence are among the most confusing and emotionally destabilizing patterns avoidants bring into relationships. They appear loving and attentive one moment, and distant and unreachable the next. This unpredictability creates a push and pull dynamic that leaves their partner in constant emotional limbo. The avoidance presence often depends on their comfort with closeness. When intimacy feels safe and light, they can be charming, warm, and seemingly devoted. But as soon as emotional depth or vulnerability is required, they retreat into absence, physically, emotionally, or both. This inconsistency is not random. It is a defense mechanism designed to maintain control and avoid the fear of engulfment that intimacy stirs within them. Avoidants crave connection like everyone else, but the moment it starts to feel too real, they instinctively withdraw. Their love becomes conditional, available only when it doesn't threaten their sense of independence or emotional safety. They might pull away right after an intimate conversation, become busy after a romantic weekend, or suddenly need space after moments of deep closeness. The partner, who experiences the emotional high of connection followed by the coldness of withdrawal, is left confused and insecure. They start to question their worth, wondering what they did wrong to make the avoidant disappear. This emotional inconsistency acts as a subtle form of disrespect because it disregards the emotional stability and trust that healthy relationships require. The avoidant may justify this behavior as needing time to recharge or maintain balance, but beneath that explanation lies fear. Fear of dependence, of vulnerability, of being needed too much. They convince themselves that too much closeness will lead to loss of self, so they distance themselves before the bond deepens. In doing so, they send a quiet but powerful message: I will be here only on my terms. This conditional presence teaches their partner to expect uncertainty, to never fully relax into the relationship. Every affectionate moment comes with an unspoken question: how long will this last before they vanish again? The partner's nervous system becomes attuned to this rhythm of hope and disappointment, creating a cycle of emotional anxiety. This pattern of selective availability also serves as a form of control. By deciding when to engage and when to retreat, the avoidant maintains emotional power. They create dependency in their partner, who begins to chase the moments of warmth and connection, hoping to win back the avoidant's attention. What the partner doesn't realize is that this is not love being withdrawn. It is emotional safety being manipulated. The avoidance distance becomes a way to ensure they are never fully accountable, never fully seen, and never truly vulnerable. It's a silent way of saying, I decide when love happens. The deeper tragedy lies in how normal this behavior feels to the avoidant. They may not perceive it as disrespectful, but as self-preservation. To them, being constantly available feels dangerous, as if it risks losing their autonomy. But love that fears availability cannot sustain itself. By rationing presence, they create a bond rooted in uncertainty, and over time, their partner learns that love is conditional, unpredictable, and fragile. This erodes the foundation of emotional security that all relationships need to thrive. What makes this dynamic so painful is its illusion of hope. The avoidant doesn't disappear completely. They give just enough affection to keep their partner attached. A kind message after days of silence, a sudden act of warmth after cold detachment. These brief moments reignite the partner's belief that things will change. But soon, the distance returns, and the cycle repeats. It's an emotional roller coaster disguised as love. The partner, exhausted yet hopeful, remains stuck in the loop, misinterpreting inconsistency as complexity and confusion as passion. The avoidant, meanwhile, remains safely detached, unaware that their selective presence communicates not care, but quiet disregard for the emotional continuity their partner desperately craves. Using independence as a shield of superiority is one of the most disguised and prideful forms of disrespect avoidants display in relationships. On the surface, independence is a virtue, a sign of maturity, strength, and self-sufficiency. But when used by an avoidant, it often transforms into an invisible wall that separates them from true intimacy. They present themselves as people who don't need anyone, who take pride in handling everything alone, and who quietly look down on those who express emotional or relational needs. Their self-reliance, instead of being healthy, becomes a subtle assertion of emotional superiority, a way to control the emotional tone of the relationship and avoid vulnerability while maintaining the appearance of composure. The avoidant often carries a deep-seated fear of dependency. In their inner world, needing someone feels dangerous, as if relying on another person automatically means losing control or becoming weak. They equate vulnerability with surrender and closeness with suffocation. To protect themselves from those fears, they elevate independence to a moral standard, convincing themselves that emotional detachment is a mark of strength and that needing love or support is a flaw. When their partner expresses a desire for connection or reassurance, the avoidant interprets it as a sign of immaturity or emotional instability. Instead of meeting that need with empathy, they withdraw, mock subtly, or rationalize their distance by claiming to value space. Over time, this dynamic turns independence into a weapon. The avoidant uses it to assert dominance in the relationship, not overtly, but through emotional tone. They might say things like, "I don't need anyone to make me happy," or "I'm just not like you. I'm more independent," as if emotional openness were a defect. Such statements quietly invalidate their partner's natural desire for closeness and teach them to doubt their emotional instincts. The partner begins to feel guilty for wanting affection or connection, believing they are somehow less evolved for needing intimacy. This is how the avoidance superiority takes root, not through aggression, but through quiet condescension disguised as emotional wisdom. What makes this form of disrespect particularly damaging is its subtlety. It often hides behind the language of self-growth or personal boundaries, which are valuable concepts but distorted in the avoidant's hands. They may say they are protecting their peace or maintaining balance, but what they are truly doing is building distance. They fear that merging too deeply with another person will make them lose their sense of self, so they construct independence into a fortress. The partner, meanwhile, keeps trying to break through, believing love requires understanding and patience, unaware that they are being subtly made to feel emotionally inferior. The avoidance independence also creates an uneven emotional economy within the relationship. They allow their partner to rely on them in limited ways, but they rarely allow themselves to lean on their partner in return. This imbalance makes the relationship feel hollow, because one person is always reaching while the other is always retreating. The avoidant believes that being self-contained protects them from pain, but it actually isolates them from connection. Their refusal to share emotional dependency tells their partner, "I don't trust you enough to need you." This silent message communicates disrespect not only for the partner's feelings, but also for the relational bond itself. The avoidance idea of strength becomes their greatest weakness. Their independence, instead of inspiring confidence, becomes a barrier that prevents emotional depth. They mistake distance for stability and control for peace. The partner, constantly striving to prove they are not too much, slowly begins to shrink within the relationship, suppressing their needs to avoid being labeled as dependent. The love that could have been nurturing turns cold, shaped by the avoidant's unspoken belief that to need someone is to lose power. In truth, What they call independence is often fear dressed as pride, and the cost of that pride is intimacy itself. Avoidance of accountability and emotional dialogue is one of the most corrosive ways avoidants show disrespect in relationships. It is the quiet refusal to engage when conflict or emotional truth arises, a subtle yet deeply damaging form of emotional negligence. When confronted with hurt feelings, disappointment, or the need for honest conversation, the avoidant often shuts down, deflects, or minimizes the issue. They may say, "It's not a big deal," or "You're overthinking it," or sometimes simply fall silent, disappearing behind emotional walls until the storm passes. To them, confrontation feels like chaos, and emotional dialogue feels like exposure. Instead of facing discomfort, they choose avoidance, leaving their partner alone with unresolved pain. This avoidance communicates without words that their own comfort is more important than the relationship's healing. At the heart of this behavior lies a fear of vulnerability and failure. Taking accountability requires admitting imperfection, acknowledging the pain they've caused, and facing emotional intensity, all things that an avoidant struggles with deeply. Their early experiences may have taught them that emotional openness leads to rejection or humiliation, so they learn to retreat whenever emotions become threatening. As adults, they carry this pattern forward, turning silence into a shield. When their partner seeks understanding, they evade with logic, denial, or emotional disappearance. This avoidance is not neutral. It is a form of emotional control. By refusing to engage, they dictate when and how emotional truths can be addressed, often leaving their partner feeling dismissed and powerless. This refusal to take responsibility damages trust over time. Relationships thrive on repair, on the ability to acknowledge mistakes and work through them together. When an avoidant avoids accountability, they block that process, leaving emotional wounds open and festering. The partner may try to reopen the conversation repeatedly, hoping for closure or empathy, but each attempt is met with indifference or irritation. Over time, the partner learns that bringing up pain only leads to more distance, so they stop trying. The relationship becomes one-sided, with one person carrying all the emotional labor while the other hides behind silence. This unspoken dynamic teaches the partner to suppress their feelings and accept emotional neglect as normal. What makes this behavior particularly destructive is that it often masquerades as calmness. The avoidant appears composed, rational, even above the drama, while their partner is left feeling like the emotional one. This illusion allows the avoidant to avoid blame while subtly invalidating the other person's experience. They convince themselves that avoiding confrontation is an act of peacekeeping, not realizing it's actually a form of emotional abandonment. In their silence, they communicate that the relationship's emotional health is not their responsibility, that empathy and repair are optional. The partner, desperate for resolution, may begin to internalize the pain, feeling unseen and unworthy of emotional effort. Avoidants also use this avoidance to escape the vulnerability of apology. To say, "I was wrong," requires emotional humility, but for the avoidant, that feels like surrendering control. They may offer superficial explanations or shift blame. "You took it the wrong way." "That's not what I meant." Phrases that sound like understanding but lack true accountability. These half-hearted responses prevent genuine emotional healing. The relationship starts to feel stagnant, trapped in a cycle of hurt and denial. The partner learns to expect avoidance instead of empathy, silence instead of dialogue. Over time, this dynamic erodes the emotional fabric of love. Without accountability, there can be no safety. Without emotional dialogue, there can be no depth. The avoidant, believing they are maintaining peace, actually breeds quiet resentment and emotional distance. Their refusal to face discomfort prevents growth, both personally and relationally. The partner, meanwhile, carries the unspoken grief of loving someone who cannot meet them in emotional truth. What remains is not connection but coexistence, a fragile bond built on unspoken pain and unacknowledged responsibility. The avoidant silence may protect them from immediate vulnerability, but it slowly dismantles the trust that intimacy depends on, leaving behind the hollow echo of what love could have been if courage had replaced avoidance. The subtle ways avoidants show disrespect in relationships are not always intentional, yet their impact runs deep. Through emotional withdrawal, dismissal of feelings, selective presence, false independence, and avoidance of accountability, they build invisible walls that quietly suffocate connection. These behaviors often stem from wounds buried long before love arrived, wounds of rejection, neglect, or the early belief that needing someone is dangerous. But love cannot survive where fear governs, and fear cannot heal where silence reigns. To the partner of an avoidant, these moments feel like walking through fog, never sure what's real, never sure how close they can get before the person they love disappears again. The pain of being unseen in the presence of someone you adore is one of the deepest emotional betrayals a human can experience. It teaches you to doubt your feelings, to question your worth, to shrink your needs just to keep peace. Yet, love that demands your silence is not peace. It is slow erosion disguised as calm. Avoidants, in their pursuit of control and safety, often forget that intimacy is not meant to confine but to connect. Real love requires participation, accountability, and emotional courage. It demands that two souls meet each other not only in strength but also in fragility. To love is to be seen in the moments we most wish to hide, and to offer the same compassion in return. Avoidants often fear this kind of transparency, believing that closeness will dissolve their individuality. But true connection does not erase the self, it expands it. Every relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting back the parts of us we struggle to face. For avoidance, that mirror shows the cost of emotional distance, the loneliness hidden beneath independence, the control that conceals vulnerability, and the calmness that is merely silence in disguise. Healing begins when they dare to look into that mirror and stay long enough to see the truth. It begins when they realize that love is not an intrusion to be feared, but a sanctuary to be shared. For love to thrive, both partners must feel seen, heard, and valued. Respect in a relationship is not just about words or gestures. It is about emotional presence. It is the willingness to show up, to listen, to take responsibility, and to meet each other in the raw, imperfect spaces where real intimacy grows. Avoidants must learn that the walls they build for protection also become their prisons, and only vulnerability can set them free. In the end, love asks for something simple yet profound: presence, not selective, not conditional, not withdrawn, but genuine presence. Because in the quiet honesty of two open hearts, fear dissolves, and what remains is something unbreakable: the courage to stay when it's easier to run, to listen when it's easier to defend, and to love when it feels terrifying to be known. That is the difference between love built on avoidance and love built on truth.